Norman told me when he met Richard Nixon, Nixon had said to him, I don't understand why you people don't actually like Archie Bunker. Something like that. I mean, it's really.
Well,
I had an affinity for Archie. Well, you know what though? But like my poppy was kind of like a Jewish version of Archie Bunker. He basically made fun of everybody, but not the Jews. So it was kind of like yeah. So I mean, it's very familiar to me.
But I have, for what it's worth, assuming we don't ever come back to the subject, I just want to make this clear that I absolutely adored Norman Lear, and we almost immediately, he contacted me. That was the fascinating thing. I mean, if I had called Norman Lear, he wouldn't have taken the phone call. But what it was is he saw me on Bill Moyer. My first time on Bill Moyer's show was I was doing Thomas Paine with Bill Moyers, and I got this. I came back to Green Bay, and it was Sunday afternoon. And it was the NFC Championship. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember. It was the Packers versus the New York Giants, and it was Favre's last.
There it is. Now he knows exactly what you're taling about. You said Giants. Okay.
Okay. So
that was a great night for me.
so at the halftime of the football game, my wife came up here to the computer where I'm sitting now, and she shouted down, "You have an email from Norman Lear." And I said, "Wow, is Norman still alive?" That kind of thing. And he was only 85 at the time, but
right.
I hadn't heard of him for some years. And he sent this email because he saw me on his best buddy Bill Moyer's show, and he never saw Bill smile with a guest as much as he did when I was on with Bill. And he said, "I have something I really need to talk to you about. If I don't hear from you, I'll get your number from Bill, and I'll call you." And I didn't have Norman Lear's number, so I didn't act on it. And a couple of days later, he called, and we were on the phone for about an hour, and he didn't even give me the details of what he wanted me to work on with him. All he did was he just wanted to talk, to schmooze, right? And I'll never forget, there's these moments with Norman. He said, he dropped the F-bomb. He said, "fuck," but something like that. And then he stopped. And he said, "Oh, wait, is that okay with you?" And I said, "It's okay by me." He goes, "Good. You'll be like my nephew." It'll be that kind of thing. and then at the end of this hour-long conversation, he said, "I'm going to have to set it up. You're going to have to come out to LA because I need you on this project." And it still didn't give me a full picture of this project. So he said, "I'd call you tomorrow, but my wife is demanding we take a vacation. So I'll call you next." It was like the following week in February. Sorry, Mike, if I bore you, forgive me. It's just,
No.
And in fact, I don't know if you saw it, I sent you, yes. I texted you pictures of Norman and me together. A couple of times we spent a good bit of time together. Anyhow, so he had this TV producer call me a week later. By the way, everything I'm telling you was surreal to me.
Right.
Okay. Because however much my circles in academia were pretty well established, and I could travel anywhere, in academic circles with what I do, and people might recognize what I accomplished, nobody in Hollywood would have paid attention to anything.
Right.
So this producer calls, and he's going on and on about this project. And all I knew at this moment was that it was titled Remix America. And this was in the early days. Remember, this is 2008. I should have made that clear.
Okay.
And this was just YouTube itself, I believe, was just taking off around that time.
Yeah, it had taken off at that point.
Okay. Well, but the way they put it is Norman wants to create a YouTube-like website so that young people, anybody, but especially high school students and college students and professors and teachers can create their own videos of social commentary. That was it. That he was launching this thing, Remix America. So finally, we're about 2 hours into this conversation. I still didn't know what my job was going to be in any of this. Maybe an hour in. This guy, Fred Graver, that was his name. Do you remember there used to be a show called, was it My Favorite Weekend, something like that?
I don't know.
You guys, it was a thing on not what's the, it was MTV, and then there was the
VH1.
VH1. I think he was a producer with VH1, et cetera, et cetera. So anyhow, he says, by the way, can you fly out to LA? This was Tuesday. Can you fly out to LA on Thursday? And I said, oh, I mean, I don't usually work like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, I happened to be on a fellowship from the NEH or somebody that year. So my time was more flexible, but I was in the middle of a book project. And he said, tomorrow, Norman or Marilyn will call you with the details. That's all I knew. I was supposed to fly out for the weekend. So the next day, I get a call from Marilyn, his assistant, Norman's assistant, and she explained that they were arranging a first-class flight. And by the way, at that point in time, first-class travel for me was a very rare, and I'd have had to be bumped by accident.
Right.
And I'm thinking, wow, this is really pretty cool. And then Norman calls. And Norman calls and says, I want you to know that tomorrow night you and I are going to meet with will.i.am.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And I was silent. And he said, do you know who will.i.am is?
And you had no idea, did you?
I had no fucking idea.
Of course you didn't.
Black Eyed Peas.
Black Eyed Peas.
Okay. No, see, Black Eyed Peas I knew, but I didn't know any one of the personalities in it other than Fergie, maybe, because she had a hit song at that point. Right? So, and he said a whole series of funny things that at the moment seemed really funny. Right now they wouldn't. He goes like, just wear your best dress. That's how Norman put it. Just wear your best dress. And I said, well, I hope a sweater and a blazer be fine. He goes, you'll look like my son if you do that. I said, well, that's going to be the case. So so the next morning I got up very early, got out to the airport, and my trip, I was supposed to get there at noon to LA, but the flights got all screwed up for a whole bunch of reasons. They had to send me through Denver. I mean, it was like over and over again. So I didn't get in until 4 p.m. Now, when I was leaving that morning, my wife said to me, no blonde.
Be able to put that in like a corner spot.
You have to do it.
You got to drop that, Colin.
Yeah, my wife said to me, no blondes, no Coke. So I land and I'm at the airport and I have no idea where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to do. And I called Marilyn and I said, how do I get to wherever Norman needs me? She said, the buyer from the house, the young woman who's responsible for keeping the house stocked with everything, she's going to come and pick you up. I said, well, how do I know what she looks like? He goes, she's blonde and very attractive.
So strike one.
So she picks me up. We get into her VW and we're driving now, and we're halfway to Beverly Hills at this point from the airport. And Norman calls me and he says, Harvey, where the fuck are you? Okay. I've had this meeting, all these people are eager to meet you. And I said, Norman, you send a blonde to the airport and you expect me to come and show up for you? He laughed and I started laughing. So I get off the phone and this young woman who was like 24 at the most, 23, she says to me, what's so funny? And I told him, I said, well, my wife told me before I got on the plane, no blondes, no Coke. She said, oh, did you want some Coke?
That's such an LA thing.
That is such an LA thing.
It was like, whoa, you know. So, and thus began, so that night, Norman and I head out and we meet up with 2 of his young assistants, these people for dinner.
It's so fun.
And the funniest part is these 2 young people said to me, who do you want for president? And I said, well, honestly, I don't like either one. Okay.
Right.
But if I had to choose, don't laugh. At that moment, if you had to choose, I said, I think I might vote for Hillary. That's what I said. Okay. I mean, the whole idea was, I swore I'd never vote for another Clinton, but I threw that out mostly because I wanted to antagonize these 2 young assistants. So then Norman and I head out from the dinner to go. We're on our way with one young woman to the it was a Black Eyed Peas fundraise. They were raising monies for their foundation. That was it. And we get there and Norman says, here's what we're going to do, Harvey. We're going to go on the red carpet, you and I. And then at the end, we're not going in. You and I are breaking and we're going to go back. We're going to go see will.i.am in the dressing room. So we go on this. By the way, it wasn't a red carpet. It was a green carpet in honor of the environment. Okay. But it was plastic. How's that? classic LA. So, and when we're hit the end of the line, people think, well, I must be Norman's close buddy because it's the two of us together. These journalists swarm around me and start asking me questions about Norman, and I said, sorry, I'm not talking. So Norman and I, so what's funny was I had called my nephew the night before, who at that point was like 13 or 14, and I told him I was going to meet will.i.am, and he said, oh, buy a CD and get his autograph. So I hadn't done that because I didn't have time. But Norman and I are heading towards the dressing rooms, and Norman said, oh, by the way, don't ask for his autograph. As far as he knows, you're more important than he is. I said, oh, okay. And so we get there, and Norman says to Will, he says, this is the most important intellectual you will ever meet. and Will, who's got a boot on his foot, had hurt his foot. He says, well, he says, but can I still hug you? That was it. Will says, can I still hug you? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. And we held this kind of meeting thing, and then we leave. And it just was the start of this. I could spend literally an hour, and you don't have the time. So on the Friday, Norman was sponsoring a conference at USC, University of Southern California, where he actually underwrites a center there on politics and entertainment, although the center is located in Beverly Hills. And so for that day, I was Norman Lear. I had this badge on because Norman didn't go to the conference. But it was really an amazing group. So there were lots of people from the entertainment industry. And then, do you know the name Lawrence Lessig?
Yes, I do. Yes.
And he was one of the star lawyers that was there to talk about copyrights and all that kind of stuff, because the whole question of Remix America was, what can you use, what can't you use in creating these videos and so on. And I was exhausted. Oh, by the way, the funniest part for me was I had no idea where we were in Brentwood. I had no idea I was in the gate. They gave me the gatehouse. They had an estate, the gatehouse, a guest house, and the main house. And I'm in the gatehouse, and at night I couldn't tell where I was. And at 4 a.m, I woke up, because that would have been like my time to wake up back in the East. And I went out on this little balcony in the bedroom I was in, and I looked down, and the sun, and I looked down, and I saw lights, and I realized that I was like on a precipice. And first thought I had as a Midwesterner, New Yorker and Midwesterner, was, holy fuck, if there's an earthquake, I'm done.
Right.
I'm literally done. But then I thought, what the hell? So I started calling everyone I knew in the East to tell them, you're not going to believe where I am right now. I'm with Norman Lear for the weekend, because I hadn't had it. It was, everything moved so quickly, I hadn't told anyone. And they're just like, their minds were like, what the fuck? What are you doing with Norman Lear? So that night, I get picked up from the conference, and we go to this house in Hancock Park, I think is the neighborhood.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it was a dinner party, which included, it was like 10 people, a dinner party that included the head of NBC Entertainment. And so this was very surreal. And by the way, seriously, there were stories from that evening, but I honestly don't think you have the time for me to.
No.
But then I'll jump ahead to the next day, Saturday. We get up, and I always would go up to the main house, as I called it, to have breakfast with Norman. He was always up early. We'd have breakfast together. He had a salad every morning for breakfast. And at that point, let me make it clear, at that point, Howard Schultz and Starbucks did not have the bullshit reputation they have now, because everyone used to talk about Starbucks being the one sort of, that Howard Schultz was providing medical.
Right. It was the good place.
Right. It was a good place. And so Norman and Howard Schultz were friends. And every morning he would have someone deliver him from Starbucks his coffee in the morning. Right. So we're sitting there, and Norman says, we're going to a meeting. First, you and I, you're here to help me write a speech. He was getting a big award from, used to be an organization Robert Borisage headed, campaign, not the CAP, Campaign for American Progress. It was the Campaign for America's Future. That was it. And he was supposed to be getting an award, and he wanted me to help him write the speech, which I did. It was a blast to do that. And then he said, we're going to what's the neighborhood? You guys, I know you're in Florida, not LA, but if you think about the Hollywood sign and go down the hill, what's the neighborhood right below that? Do you know?
West Hollywood.
West Hollywood.
Okay, so that neighborhood, which is a lot of small houses down
West
there,
Hollywood.
actually not unlike my own house here in Green Bay. And we were going to a meeting of the head of Norman's sort of foundation, the TV producer that was leading the charge on this thing. And was it just the three of us? Well, four of us and Norman. So the four of us. And on the way there, we're pulling out onto the highway. And Norman said, later in the day, I'm going to give you a personal tour of Hollywood. I said, oh, great. That's cool. So we're pulling out to the highway. And we've had a fairly detailed set of conversations already about Norman and me being friends and all that kind of stuff. And Norman said to me, I want to give you a gift. I said, shit, this is a gift. I mean, this is my first time in LA, really.
Right.
And then he said, no, but I want to give you a gift. And I want to give what I want to do is I want to give you $10,000.
It's nice.
Wow.
It's a nice
Well,
gift.
that was like, like, whew. And I said, you don't have to give me anything. He said, no, here's the deal. I want to give you $10,000. I'm going to give you $1,000 a month up until November, the elections. Because I want to know that I can call you at any time and you'll actually talk to me. And I said, you don't have to do that. No, I insist. So I said, Norman, just understand, you don't have to do it, but neither will I fail to appreciate it when it starts. So I thought, wow, this is great. And he said 10,000 because it was to be tax-free as a gift. As opposed
Right.
So
that's cool. I sort of have a pay to talk to me sort of attitude here on generational change. People know that if they want to have conversation with me, they need to join on patreon.com.
That's a great one.
And that's very well said. Okay. So hold on. So we get to this little meeting and I'm sitting there and I don't really know my role yet. And they start talking and it was a mix of Hollywood talk and postmodernism. Norman's not talking. It's these two people, the TV producer and this younger woman who apparently had a lot of ties inside the Democratic Party as well in LA area. And at a certain point, it sounded like a whole meeting of jargon. They were developing a mission statement for the project. And Norman turned to me and said, Harvey, what do you think about this? And I said, well, I don't want to be impolite and I'm the stranger here, but I don't think what you're saying makes any sense at all. Why don't we just say the mission is to help create smart, educated, critical, engaged citizens? Simple. And Norman said, okay, this meeting's over. And he said, but give me a moment. So he goes to the bathroom and he comes back from the bathroom and he said, this was a great meeting. We get out to the car, we sit down, and he says, now do you know why you're here?
Because somebody needed common sense in Hollywood.
Exact. That was, he needed me and he wanted somebody with a historical sensibility and a patriot. He loved Thomas Paine. He loved Thomas Paine. And he wanted somebody who knew Thomas Paine and the American Revolution. And he liked my progressive patriotism. Okay. So now we're beginning. I just got to tell you this. We're begin this drive. Now he's going to take me back through Hollywood, no highways. And he said to me, Harvey, when I was in the bathroom, I was standing there and I was pissing and I thought, I could die right here. And he said, he said, what do you make of that? I said, well, that would have been a real downer, Norman. And he said, and the point is that, and my point, which will be made better maybe in the next moment, is we're now heading into Hollywood and we're at a traffic light. And on the left, as I'm looking at Norman, I could see that there's like this strip joint, And
Wow.
So it's like live nude girls in the window, it says.
Yeah.
And Norman says, hey, you want to go see live nude girls? And I said, I really would, Norman. The problem is you might die in there, and that would be really embarrassing. And he just broke into hysterics as I'm breaking into hysterics now. And one of the beauties with Norman is that he was He was a comedic writer, but he was always willing to play the straight man.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.